I left for the oil fields on a Sunday. My daughter, Piper, was standing at the front door in her pajamas, the ones with the little foxes on them, holding a piece of toast she hadn't eaten. She was 11. I told her I'd be back in 6 weeks. She nodded like she already knew I was lying about the timeline, the way kids do when they've heard it before. "Be good for your aunt," I said. She didn't hug me. She just watched me load my bag into the truck. I told myself that was normal. She was at that age. Everything with her was quiet and watchful now. Like she was cataloging everything that happened and filing it somewhere I couldn't reach. My sister-in-law, Donna, was staying at the house. My wife had passed 2 years before, breast cancer, 11 months from diagnosis to the end. And Donna had stepped in during the worst of it, and never fully stepped back out. She helped with school pickups, with dinner, with the things I couldn't manage when I was home, and couldn't do at all when I wasn't. I was grateful for her in the way that you're grateful for someone who does things you should be doing yourself. It sat in my chest like a stone. The rig I was working was in North Dakota. 16-hour days, rotating shifts, the kind of work where you stop thinking about anything except the task in front of you. And that's exactly why men like me take those jobs. I called home every other night. Piper would talk to me for a few minutes. School, a book she was reading, something the neighbor's dog did, and then go quiet, and I'd hear the TV in the background and know she'd set the phone down. I didn't push. I was 3 weeks in when Donna texted me. Piper has been accepted to the summer enrichment program she applied to. She's really excited. I'm going to take her to orientation Saturday. I hadn't known Piper applied to anything. I texted back, "What program?" Donna said it was something through the school. A STEM-focused residential program up in Minnesota, 6 weeks on a college campus for kids who'd been identified as academically gifted. She sent me the brochure link. It looked legitimate, affiliation with a small private college. Photos of kids in labs and hiking trails, testimonials from parents about how their children had thrived and grown in ways we couldn't have anticipated. Piper called me that night, which she almost never did on her own. "Dad," she said, "can I go?" She sounded the way she used to sound when she was small and asking for something she really wanted before she learned to stop wanting things so openly. It caught me off guard. I looked at the brochure again. The cost was $3,200 for the full 6 weeks. That was steep, but not insane for a residential program. I had the money. I told Donna to get the paperwork together, and I told Piper yes. She said, "Thank you," and hung up before I could say anything else. I thought about that call for a long time after. The quickness of it, like she'd been waiting for the answer, and once she had it, she was done. I went back to work. The rig schedule ran long. 6 weeks became 8. I called Donna when I could, but she was managing the house and dropping off Piper's things at the program and getting the forms notarized and doing what Donna did, which was handle everything so I didn't have to think about it. I called Piper twice before she left. She sounded fine. Excited, she said. She packed already. On the day she was supposed to leave, I called to say goodbye, and the call went to voicemail. I figured she was in the car with Donna on her way. I left a message. I said I loved her and I'd call when I could and to have fun. I didn't hear back. 3 days later, I texted Donna asking how the drop-off went. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji and said Piper had been nervous, but okay. I told myself that was enough. It wasn't until week 2 of the program that I realized I had no idea what Piper's daily schedule looked like. I went back to the brochure. There was a note about limited phone time to encourage full immersion, which I'd skimmed the first time and hadn't thought much about. Kids at camps were always on limited phone time. That was normal. Week 3, I tried calling the number on the brochure. It rang 4 times and went to a recording that said the administrative office had limited hours and I could leave a message. I left one. Nobody called back. I told myself I was being anxious. I told myself Donna would have said something if anything was wrong. I called Donna and she said she hadn't heard from Piper directly, but that the program had sent a form letter saying the kids were settling in and thriving. I asked her what the return address on the letter was. She read it to me. Rural route number. Town called Birchwood, Beltrami County, Minnesota. I looked it up that night on my phone. Birchwood wasn't a town. It was a census-designated place, barely a dot on the map. The college affiliation in the brochure, I looked for it. The school existed, small liberal arts place in the Twin Cities, but when I searched the specific program name, I found nothing connecting them except the brochure itself. I sat with that for a long time. I want to say I acted immediately. I want to tell you I got in my truck that night. The truth is, I spent 2 days going back and forth telling myself I was overreacting. That I was a man who worked in the oil fields and my mind ran toward worst cases because I'd spent 2 years watching my worst case come true. And maybe I was just catastrophizing again. Then Donna called me. Her voice was off in a way I couldn't name at first. Something flat and careful. She said she'd run into a woman at the grocery store whose daughter was also in the program. The woman had asked if Donna had gotten any letters from her kid, and Donna said no, and the woman said she hadn't either. And then the woman said something that made Donna drive straight home and call me. She said her daughter had told her at drop-off that one of the older kids she'd met at orientation had told her the girls at the program did farm work in the mornings before class. Physical stuff. Said it was part of the character-building curriculum. I asked Donna how old the woman's daughter was. She said 12. I called the program number again. This time someone picked up on the second ring. A man, professional sounding, told me he was the program director. His name was Aldous, said he'd love to chat, but they were in the middle of an activity session and could he call me back within the hour. He did not call me back. I got in my truck. I drove 14 hours. I didn't sleep. I stopped once for gas and toffee and kept going. I had the rural route address from Donna, and I had Google Maps, and I had the feeling you get when you already know the answer to a question and you're driving toward the confirmation. The property was 20 miles past any town worth naming. Long gravel road through birch trees. No signage until I was almost at the gate. A plain wooden sign that said Northwood Academy in carved letters. The gate was metal, chained. It was 5:30 in the morning. I parked on the shoulder and walked. The chain wasn't padlocked. I unwound it and pushed the gate open and walked up the road. There was enough light to see. The property was bigger than I'd expected. A main building, 2 long, low structures that looked like they might be dormitories, a barn, an equipment shed with a door propped open. I heard it before I saw it. The sound of wood splitting. Rhythmic, heavy, like someone doing it the hard way, working through a stack. I went toward the sound. There were 5 of them. Kids. Behind the barn, in a cleared area, splitting wood. An adult was standing at the edge of the tree line, with his back to me, watching them. None of the kids noticed me at first. Piper was second from the left. She was in clothes I didn't recognize. Work pants, heavy boots, her hair pulled back. She was thin in a way she hadn't been when I'd last seen her. Her hands on the axe handle were wrapped in athletic tape. She was splitting wood at 5:30 in the morning, and she didn't look scared, and she didn't look happy. And she looked exactly like someone who had been doing this long enough that the shock of it had worn off. I said her name. The adult at the tree line turned around. Middle-aged man, rangy, wearing a canvas jacket. He started walking toward me with his hands in his pockets and his chin down. Piper's head came up. She didn't drop the axe. She set it down very carefully, blade first, into the stump, and looked at me. I can't tell you exactly what was on her face in that moment. It wasn't relief, not immediately. It was something more careful than that. Like she was waiting to find out if I was real. "Dad," she said. "You're here. Not you came back. Not I knew you'd come. Just, you're here. Present tense. Like she had already learned not to assume anything about the future. I said, "I'm here, come on." The man in the canvas jacket reached us and put himself between me and the other kids. He introduced himself as Aldous Crane, the program director, and said in a level voice that I needed to sign out through the office, and that unscheduled family visits were a violation of the program agreement I'd signed. I looked at my daughter. I looked at the tape on her hands. I looked at the 4 other kids who had stopped what they were doing and were watching us with the particular stillness of children waiting to see how adults behave. I told him I hadn't signed any agreement about unscheduled visits. He said I should come to the office and we'd look at the paperwork together. I said I wasn't going to the office. I said I was taking my daughter and leaving, and if he had a problem with that, he should call whoever he wanted to call. He said, very quietly, that he had a relationship with the county sheriff, and that if I removed a minor from the program without following proper procedure, he would make things difficult for me. I said, "She's my daughter, and she's standing right in front of me." He took out his phone. I told Piper to get her things. She went. I stood there while Crane made his call, and I made mine. I called 911, not the county, and I told them I was a parent at a children's program who had found minors performing manual labor at 5:30 in the morning, and I gave them the address. And I said I believed there were other children on the property and I didn't know the conditions they were being held in. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line. Piper came back with a backpack that was half empty. She'd arrived with 2 bags. I looked at that half-empty backpack, and I picked it up, and I took her hand, and we walked to the truck. She didn't look back at the barn. She didn't look back at the other kids. She got in the passenger seat and buckled her seatbelt and looked straight ahead. I kept the dispatcher on speaker. Crane was still on his phone at the edge of the property, watching us. I asked Piper if she was okay. She said, "I want to go home." I said, "We're going home." She said, "There's a boy in the equipment shed." I stopped. She said it again, the same way, no louder. Matter of fact, the way you say something after you've thought about whether or not to say it and decided you have to. "There's a boy in the shed. He tried to run 2 weeks ago. They put him in there." I told the dispatcher what she'd just said. 2 state patrol units arrived 17 minutes later, 3 more behind them. A county social services supervisor who drove up in a personal vehicle and got out with a badge and a clipboard, and the look of someone who has seen enough bad situations to stop being surprised by them. Aldous Crane did not leave. He stood in the driveway and told everyone who would listen that the program was accredited, that the children were there voluntarily, that the labor component was educational and part of a character development model that had been in place for 11 years. The boy in the equipment shed was 13 years old. His name was Thomas. He'd been in there for 9 days. He had a sleeping bag and a bucket and a padlock on the outside of the door. He was from Illinois. His parents didn't know where he was. They'd been told the program had changed locations for the second session and that the new address would be mailed to them. They hadn't gotten a letter. When Thomas came out of the shed and saw all the patrol cars, he started crying. Not loud crying, the quiet kind, where someone has been holding something in for so long that when it finally comes out, there's almost no sound to it. Piper watched him from the truck window. She didn't say anything. I don't know what she was thinking. I've thought about that a lot in the time since. They arrested Aldous Crane that morning. His wife, who ran the administrative side of the operation, was arrested 2 days later when investigators finished going through the finances. The program had been operating for 11 years, as Crane had said, cycling through roughly 40 children each summer. Parents paid between $2,800 and $4,500 per child. The children worked the property: firewood, farm produce, equipment maintenance, and the output was sold locally. The college affiliation was fabricated. The staff had no educational credentials. The limited phone contact policy was a mechanism for limiting parental oversight, not for enrichment. 14 other families were contacted in the days after the arrests. Several had children who'd attended in prior years and never fully described what had happened there. A few of those kids came forward after the news broke. The criminal charges included child labor violations, false advertising, unlawful restraint for the situation with Thomas, and several counts related to fraud. Crane's attorney argued that the program operated within an educational exemption framework. The judge did not agree. Crane received 6 years. His wife received 4. The property was seized. The civil case took longer. I won't get into all of it here. Piper and I received a settlement and I put it in a college account in her name, and she knows it's there and she's never asked about it. What I want to tell you about is the drive home. 14 hours. We stopped twice. Once for breakfast at a diner outside of Fargo, once for gas. Piper ordered pancakes and ate the whole plate, which she hadn't done in a long time at home. She didn't talk much. I didn't push. I didn't push. Somewhere in South Dakota, she fell asleep against the window, and I drove in the quiet with the flat land opening up on both sides, and I thought about the version of this where I'd stayed at the rig, where I'd told myself I was overreacting for one more week, where I'd waited until the program ended. Thomas had been in that shed for 9 days when we got there. The staff told investigators he'd been put there as a controlled measure and that he was being monitored. He had a bucket. He was 13. I thought about that a lot on the drive. I still do. When Piper woke up, she was quiet for a while, looking out the window at the grass. Then she said, "I knew you'd figure it out." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "After the first week, I stopped thinking anyone was coming. But when I stopped thinking about it, it felt different, like I knew somewhere, but I'd stopped waiting." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. After a minute, she said, "The other kids kept asking why nobody came. I didn't know what to tell them." I said, "I should have come sooner." She said, "Yeah, just that. Not to make me feel worse. Just honest, the way she was always honest when it mattered even as a small kid." She looked back out the window. We drove the rest of the way mostly in silence, and it was the best silence I'd had in years. I want to say something to parents before I finish this. I almost didn't catch it. I want you to understand that. I am not a negligent person. I was working. I was supporting my daughter. I was doing what I thought the job required. I had a trusted family member watching over things. I had what looked like a legitimate program with real brochures and a working phone number. I missed it for 4 weeks. The things I should have done and didn't. I should have called the affiliated institution directly to confirm the partnership. I should have gotten a physical address for the program before she left, not a rural route number. I should have asked why phone contact was restricted before I agreed to it. I should have asked for references from parents of previous attendees. I should have asked to speak to a staff member with educational credentials. None of those things are obvious until they're obvious. The woman at the grocery store who mentioned the farm work to Donna, that was luck. A 2-minute conversation between strangers in a produce aisle, that was what put me in the truck. Don't rely on luck. If your child is somewhere for longer than a week and you haven't heard their voice, that is a problem. I don't care how immersive the program is. I don't care what the policy says. You have the right to talk to your child. Any program that tells you otherwise is telling you something important. Piper is doing okay. She's in 8th grade now. She's quiet in ways she wasn't before. And she's watchful in ways she always was. She started a journal during the time she was there, writing things down so she wouldn't forget them. And she's kept writing since. She showed me one entry once, just one. And I read it and gave it back and didn't say anything. Because there was nothing I could say that would be adequate. She told me last spring that she wants to be a lawyer. Something about family advocacy. I told her she'd be good at it. She said, "I know." Not arrogance, just certainty. The kind you earn by going through something that could have broken you and finding out it didn't. I think about those other kids. The ones from the years before. The ones whose parents maybe never fully knew what happened because the kids came home and said it was fine, or said it was hard but okay. The way kids do when they don't have the words yet or don't think the words will do anything. I think about Thomas. He and his family moved a year after everything happened. I got a card from his mother at Christmas. She didn't say much in it. She didn't have to. I drove 14 hours because something didn't add up. That's the whole story, really. Something didn't add up. And instead of talking myself out of it again, I got in the truck. Get in the truck. Whatever version of the truck that is for you. Make the call, ask the hard question, drive the 14 hours. Do it before you have another reason to talk yourself out of it, because the thing you're afraid of finding is almost never as bad as the thing that happens to kids when nobody comes. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that summer. Not in any mystical sense, just the plain mechanics of it. How one decision opens a door and another closes one. And the distance between those two things is sometimes 14 hours of highway, and sometimes just the moment you stop explaining away what your gut is already telling you. Aldous Crane ran that property for 11 years. He did it because it worked. Parents were busy, or grieving, or trusting, or all three at once, and he built a system designed to sit just inside the edge of what people were willing to question. The brochure was real-looking. The phone number answered sometimes. The policy about limited contact sounded like enrichment. He understood that most people, when given a reasonable-sounding explanation, will accept it. Because the alternative is believing something that is very hard to believe about the world. That's not weakness. That's just how people function. You can't go through every day assuming the worst about every institution that touches your child's life. You'd collapse. So you extend trust. And usually trust is what the situation deserves, and you move on. But here's what I've learned, and I mean learned the hard way, in the sense that Piper came home thinner than she left, and with tape on her hands and 9 days of silence stored somewhere inside her that I still can't fully reach. Trust is not the same as verification. Extending trust doesn't mean surrendering your right to confirm. Those are two different things, and Crane counted on parents not knowing the difference. What broke his operation wasn't law enforcement. It wasn't a journalist or a government audit. It was a woman in a grocery store mentioning something small to someone who was paying attention. That's it. That is the full mechanics of how it ended. A 2-minute conversation, and then Donna called me, and then I stopped talking myself out of it. I think about the 11 years before that conversation, the families who came before, the kids who went home and didn't have the words for what had happened, or had the words but didn't think they'd be believed, or thought it was their fault somehow for not thriving the way the brochure said they would. I think about what it costs a child to carry something like that without anyone coming to get it from them. Piper told me she stopped waiting after the first week. She said it felt different once she stopped. Not better, just different. Like she'd made a decision to survive the situation rather than wait to be rescued from it. She was 11 years old when she made that decision. 11. And she made it because that was the only rational response to the information she had at the time. That's not resilience in the inspirational sense. That's a child doing math. That's a child figuring out that the people who were supposed to come hadn't come, and adjusting accordingly. The fact that she was wrong, that I was coming just later than I should have been, doesn't make what she did any less real or any less costly. I got in the truck when I stopped letting reasonable explanations override what I actually knew, not suspected, knew. The difference matters. What I want every parent to take from this is not that the world is full of Aldous Cranes, because it isn't. What I want you to take is that your discomfort is data. Your unease is information. The moment you catch yourself constructing an argument for why you don't need to make the call or drive the hours, that construction itself is the signal. Reasonable situations don't require that much reasoning. Piper wants to be a lawyer now. Family advocacy. She told me calmly, like it was already decided. And I believe her because I've watched her turn what happened to her into something she understands rather than something that just happened to her. That takes a particular kind of intelligence. Not book intelligence, but the kind that looks at pain and asks what it's for instead of just asking when it will stop. I didn't teach her that. She came to it herself in a shed-adjacent barn in northern Minnesota at 5:30 in the morning, when I was still 2 states away, talking myself out of being afraid. She's the one who told me about Thomas. She held that information for the entire drive back to the truck and then said it like a fact because it was a fact, and because she'd already decided that someone needed to know. She was right. She was right about everything. I just needed to get there.